Welcome to Pedagogy NEXT, a podcast about excellence in teaching and higher education. For our inaugural podcast today, we are talking to Dr. Ken Roemer. Dr. Roemer is an Emeritus Fellow, and when he was teaching, he was both a Piper Professor and member of both the UTA Academy of Distinguished Teachers and Academy of Distinguished Scholars. Dr. Roemer shared with us not only his experiences teaching, but his views on how being active in the development of a secondary level Native American focused ethnic studies course has also become part of his teaching. We learned a lot from Dr. Roemer and can't wait to share.
Hello and welcome to Pedagogy NEXT. I'm LaDonna Aiken.
I'm Peggy Semmingson, and we're talking to the esteemed Dr. Ken Roemer, English Emeritus Professor. We'll let you introduce your background.
Okay, my background and I'm going to focus mainly on teaching. I went to Harvard, University of Pennsylvania, and then came directly to UT Arlington, and I've been here after that, which sounds, boy, that's boring. Where did you go? You didn't do anything else? And I'll get onto that later. But now I am retired, emeritus faculty, and the fancy title is the Emeritus Fellow, UT System Academy of Distinguished Teachers. So,
awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about your when you started teaching at UTA? A little bit about your background here.
Okay, I'm going to go a little bit of a prequel, and that's how I got my experience teaching. I got experience teaching because of a dishonest colleague, a faculty, a student. We were both PhD students. I don't know exactly what she did, but she did something that was really bad. And so mid-year, her fellowship for teaching was pulled, and they needed someone to teach. It was a TA. You know, once a week I would meet with the students, and then I would give a lecture to the whole group. I did it for no pay, and I did it because I had some research going, and I was assistant editor of American Quarterly, but I had no teaching at all. And the job market, even back in 1970, was just about as bad as it is now for humanities. And I knew I had to have teaching. So I taught it for nothing, but that helped me get the job at UTA. And at UTA, I make this point because sometimes when I say, gee, if you've been at one place for 48 years, is that, well, several things have kept me here. One, the job market. But two, the diversity of the students, which we've heard about, and we often forget the age diversity. My oldest student was 74. And the backgrounds, the many women who've come back at 50, some who were executive business people, that has really kept me here. But I have done teaching twice. I've taught in Japan, and I've taught in about 8 other countries. And I taught at this forum, European Forum, Outback. And as you might expect, it's almost all European teachers except 3 are selected from America. And I got to do that. And now my teaching experience is mainly with high school, because I've been working, and I'll get into this later, working with a course in Native Studies we've been working on for 4 years. So just this week I'm going to be doing teacher training stuff on that. So I've been at one place the whole time, but I've been lucky enough to have diversified students and do other types of jobs, other places.
Awesome. Well, thanks. Thanks for that great question and great answer. So what is your overall worldview of teaching overall?
Yeah, I got prompt on this question. I knew I was going to get it. It's a big question, so I'm going to give a big answer. I think it's to transfer to the present generation and coming generations what you consider to be the most important knowledge, skills, and values. That's a tremendous responsibility, and we're not the only ones who do it. Obviously, parents, grandparents, coaches, religious leaders, the media, everything is doing this. But we're the ones who, officially gets the entrepreneur of being the ones who are supposed to do this. So it is a heavy responsibility, especially in an age with social media when different norms are just being, it's not there. And so it's exciting, but a really big responsibility. That's the worldview.
Yeah, I like it.
Absolutely. What is an idea or a mentor or a teacher that has affected your teaching?
I've had a lot of mentors who've helped me with research, but I'm going to name 3 very different people who, in terms of teaching. One is a UTA retired professor, Mary Lynn Crow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And when I first got here in the 1970s, yes, I'm that old, in the 1970s, she had a faculty, what did they call it? Teaching center,
Yeah.
faculty center. And of course, we have a really good one now. And I went to that, and I went to it because I felt I needed help. It was my 3rd year of teaching, and I was lecturing, and in one of my classes, I started to listen to myself. I think it's Kierkegaard who says you can start seeing to yourself at different levels. And I'm saying, if I'm listening to myself lecture, and I've only taught 3 years, and that sort of distances me from the students, this is not good. So I went there, and what she did was she encouraged me to apply, and I don't think Exxon does this anymore, but they had an Exxon Innovative Teaching grant, and she encouraged me to apply. I applied, and I made the first step, and we went to West Virginia University. And there, it was mainly with a bunch of engineers and scientists, and these folks are really competitive when it comes to grants. And there were about 10 or 12 of us on only maybe 6 grants. And so we had a week living together, competing against each other, which is, but I did get it. And the way this changed it, and again, I never would have done this without Mary Lynn, it was like what they called guided design. And I'll give you a real mini. Basically what you do, you decide, okay, what type of material do I want the students to learn? What type of concepts and maybe even values you want them to learn. Then you make a series of open-ended problems that can be divided. It's almost like the scientific method, starting with defining the problem, which so many people don't do. That's why they get messed up. And you give it to them, the group gives you a feedback, and then you give a feedback, a written feedback, that's been pre-prepared, that someone who is an expert or knows something about that field, not the right answer. And then at the end of that, there's another question, and it goes on, and by the end, the students are really taking over. So it's really an ultimate flipped classroom because they do all the reading out of class, and then they use those. But they can use any reading or experience they've ever had. Now, I've only really done this completely in one class called Build Your Own Utopia. But how it influenced all the rest of my classes, really, from a little seminar of 10 people to 120 is the biggest I taught. At the end of every class, I announce a certain problem related to their readings. And then the class is divided into groups. And then they come back in the next class. And for the first at least 20 minutes, they work on groups. And then we go around, and then it builds up to a whole class discussion. And it's great for me because I learn a lot. That's what I like. So Mary Lynn was number 1. Number 2, very different. His name was M.W. Bloomberg. He had been either at Cambridge or Oxford teaching Chaucer. Came to Harvard, and he announced the first class, every English major had to take Chaucer. So there's about 115 of us in the class. He said, I've never taught a class bigger than 15 students. I am way too old to change the way, so I'm going to do it. And in the one sense, you would say he broke every rule. First thing he did, he would stand up in front and he would point. And he would point to one student. And that student had to read several lines from, maybe we were doing The Wife of Bath or something, in Middle English. And so all of us for that first, so that's probably terrible. And then what he would do is he would get up behind the lectern, and I think he even leaned on it a little bit, and he would go line by line. And you would say, this is just awful. No group discussion, no eye contact, no all that stuff.
Yeah.
He loved it so much, and he knew so much that it was just incredible. It was one of the best courses I've ever had. And what that taught me was, I think there are two pillars of being a good teacher. One, it's a calling. It is a calling. It is not a job, it's a calling, and probably lasts for life. You're wanting to teach. And the second, you have to have the knowledge. One of the articles that Marilyn had us read was about a med school experiment. They had one teacher who was really engaging. He was the sage on the stage who wandered across, and then another guy who was kind of like Bloomberg. What Bloomberg was doing was telling the truth. He had knowledge. The other guy was not so much. And all the students, rated the engaging person got all. And the point of this was, you got to be careful. If you're really engaging and have a great personality, but if you're not transmitting knowledge, that's. And then the other two things that, the third person, very different again, is Carl Sagan, the one who, Cosmos.
Yeah.
And this was before he went to Cornell. It was obvious he had a calling. It's funny. He said that he was, I think, either agnostic or atheist. He was the most, spiritual, religious man I've ever read. He was just so fascinated with what we've been given in life. And he was engaging. And he was also, you can be engaging, that's good too. And he was a good listener, that's another thing. So at the core that I learned from those three mentors was, it's a calling. You have to have the right knowledge. And then it's also good to be engaging if you can, and to listen. So three very different people, but they really impressed me.
That's great. I know Dr. Crow from the College of Education.
Yes.
She's fabulous. So we're glad you could share that history with us. So what are, kind of looking more broadly, like at your career teaching, what are some of your best teaching ideas and activities with students, just in general, or if you can name any specific ones?
Since I just gave you such a long answer, I'll give you a shorter answer.
Okay.
Give you one thing.
Okay.
And again, it's something I robbed, from somebody else.
Yeah, those are the best.
Professor I read about, I think it was political science, and I modified it. I think the feedback that we get, it's kind of valuable, but it's the end of the year. It's usually a one-shot deal, and students are thinking of a lot of other things. So, I've learned some things about it. Like most teachers, I usually remembered the critical comments as opposed to the praise. You figure out the one. But what I started doing maybe 10 years ago, I reserved 5 minutes at the end of the class, and they can write it on any sort of note paper, and they had to answer two questions. What was the major focus of this class? What? And two, what engaged you the most? What specific thing engaged you? Now, the first one was good because let's say if I were teaching on Frederick Douglass's The Narrative Life of Frederick Douglass, and I was teaching something about how he used his rhetoric to make white folks understand what slavery was. And if the answers that came back were sort of like that, I said, okay, go on. But if they were all sorts of other things, I said, okay, we got to stop and kind of go back and see why and do that. But the second question was even more engaging. Because, for example, I can't remember if it was the Frederick Douglass one or another one, but this one guy said, oh no, I know what it was. I did this identity experiment showing how by selecting different things from your life, you can create a different persona. Because the course was about writing autobiography. And whenever you write an autobiography, you're being selected. So I did some there. And I happened to mention in one of them that for 5 summers I was a farmhand. I mean, this, I didn't even mention it in class. It was just this little thing on the side. And this student, that's what he wanted to talk about, because he had worked on a farm. And he'd never heard of professors working on farms. And he wanted to, it was good. So it just, all these little things. And I was really helped at that time because I had 2 TAs that were exceptional. And one of them was very, very organized. And she was an incredible typist, and she recorded all these. And she could sort of give a table of all the responses so we could see what really. And then at the beginning of class, I would read some of these. And I didn't expect what happened. What happened was a little bit of competition. Everybody wanted to be picked.
Oh, wow. That's fun.
So they would had some really, engaging, interesting things. And then the other TA, Mr. Hulk, he put together a slideshow at the end because one of the students was art history, and it was illustration. And instead of giving me notes, he would draw a picture of what he responded to personally with a little caption underneath. So what Mr. Hulk did was he made so this was something that, this is a clever idea, but it worked and it really engaged the students, and it's so simple.
Yeah.
Right.
And it means I got feedback every class and saw where I did, no, you really didn't get to him that time. And so that was one thing that I've really liked to do.
I love that. Simple ideas, but so effective.
Yeah. And it really helped because this was a class of about 100 to have this one very organized TA who could put those all together.
Absolutely.
So that's a little thing that I liked.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Can you describe a time when you were really inspired by your students? And, why?
There's so many times. In other words, I still remember, and Dr. Michael Britton, who was the director of the Writing Center here, he was in this class. It was a graduate class that focused a lot on poetry. I don't know if I was comparing it to Native American or what. But it was one of those classes that, you just say, oh, this is a pretty good class. Oh, this is a very good class. I am learning so much. And all of a sudden there was this, feeling in the class that was just, it was just wonderful. And I walked out as if I'd had a religious experience.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
I can remember another class where I was really ticked off at a class and yelled at them in an email where I shouldn't have, and that was a lower point. But so every once in a while there'd be this epiphany. And the reason I like discussion so much is I learn a lot and it helps. But there were other types. Let me give you one example and why I like UTA's diversity. My oldest student was 74 years old, okay? Very interesting background. He was University of Pennsylvania, 6'8". He was in the crew team, so his arm was up. And he was one of the people in charge of segregating hospitals in the South. And I guess it's good to be 6'8" and very strong. And he was interested in utopia and utopian literature. He had gotten all his degrees, but he came back and he wanted to study with me. So he was in the class. And again, why I like UTA, I traditionally in this class take the students to an intentional community north of Denton called Whitehawk. Really fascinating. These ferrous cement domed buildings. It's the sustainability stuff way before it was popular. So I was going to take them. Well, his daughters got wind of this, and they thought it's going to be some sort of a cult. And they were warning him, and he was getting nervous. Well, there was a group of women students around him. And they didn't know I was watching, but after class, they took him out in the hall, and they said, "Don't worry. We're going to be with you the whole time. Your daughter doesn't have to worry. It's good." And they were being mother figures to the 74-year-old, 6'7" guy.
Yeah.
And I'll give you one other little example about diversity. One summer school, I had, I don't know if you've heard of the Mojos, the Texas football team. That's the really good one. Well, I think he was a linebacker. This guy was big. And then I had another person in class who was an ex-convict, who was also very big. He was African American. The Mojo was white. We were studying Frederick Douglass. I'm coming back to him again. And the Mojo guy said something that was borderline racist. And the African American student didn't like that. And they started glaring at each other, and they stood up. At one time I lifted weights and I was 40 pounds heavier and I was strong, but those days are gone. And even at that time, I couldn't have taken on these two guys. So I said, what am I going to do? And the African American gentleman made a little joke about what they were doing. And it relieved the whole pressure. And then gradually in the semester, first they were sitting there and then they're closer. And by the end of the semester, right together. And I think that taught those students more than anything I said this semester.
Wow.
And so that's one of those UTA-inspired epiphany with this 74-year-old guys who killed segregation in the hospitals, and these two large people who started out wanting to kill each other and then ended up being friends.
Oh, wow. Those are great.
UTA is good that way.
Those are good observations.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so our next question ties back to teaching. So at the deepest level, what does teaching do for you?
I am a little bit of a compulsive teacher. I like to share, so this gives me just last week, my wife and I were doing this little sing bit for a seniors luncheon. And before one of the songs, it was Singing in the Rain. I had to tell everybody that when Gene Kelly did this, he had 102 fever. It was just so teaching gives me the opportunity to do that. At UTA, I just learn a lot. It's in part because of the variety of students. So it helps me to learn. So that's another reason. It also gives me an excuse to perform. And that's because usually in the big classes, in a lot of my classes, the first 20 minutes, say of an hour and a half, would be lecture or PowerPoint. And then it would be all these other things. So I am a compulsive sharer, and this gives me the opportunity to do it. I've also been rewarded, with titles and things like that. But also because I've served on so many awards committees, I not only know that there are teachers as good as me at UT, there are teachers that are a lot better than I am. Don't tell the people that give me awards. And so that it's rewarding to know that, we are not an Ivy League school, but when you look at what some of the teaching that's going on, it makes you feel good to be part of this. So those are some of the reasons.
Absolutely.
That I get from it.
That's great. Thank you.
Yes. And what would you say to our audience about what we do as teachers, and how would you push pedagogy forward?
There's the traditional things. I did presentations and I wrote articles, and one of my books is a little textbook that relates to teaching. So that's good, but two other ways I think have been, one I think has been effective. I hope the other one will be. I directed 4 National Endowment for the Humanities seminars at UTA, the Native American literature. And it was mostly high school teachers from all across the country, and then 1 or 2 professors from another country. And so these teachers were good. The education for me there was, I had, teachers from Andover and Exeter, the most prestigious, but also rural Louisiana schools. And so the needs of their their students were so different that, that kept me on my toes, and we all had together think about how do you promote ideas that would work in all these different schools. So that's one way. Most recently, and here's the one where it's still unknown, because I think that did help a lot. Some of the students went back and instituted some of the things I taught. One of them went on and got a PhD and now focuses on Native literature. But what I've been involved in for the last 4 years, really, is a course in Native Studies. It's American Indian Native Studies, because there's no 100% agreement on the title, for all public Texas high schools. We do have African American Studies. The first one was actually Mexican American, and I think that was in 2018 they were passed. But no Native American. So this started out, there have been at least 50 people. It started out with a big gathering over at TCU, and then there was a gathering of 70 Native leaders from Oklahoma and Texas, just to say what they think would be important for this. And then we formed a committee, and then what I didn't know about Texas hoops to jump through for courses, the standards, the TEKS, all these things.
Yeah.
So I was, and so it involved curriculum development. It involved including the resources, but it involved working with what supposedly 50 member committee. It got down to about 12 that did the work. That happens. But this was what I didn't fully anticipate. I really should have. I can say this because I'm retired. Can't fire me, right?
Yeah.
We are having trouble down in Austin with the State Board of Education. It got bumped. We were supposed to go through our first. We got innovative course status, so it can be taught. But really, to get the approval of the State Board of Education as an ethnic studies elective, it's not forced, still elective, that makes education boards, principals, teachers say, okay, this is legitimate. And we were supposed to, in January, have a first reading for the course. A week before the course, it got, and the staff didn't even know it, got bumped. And then in April, it got bumped. It comes up in a couple of weeks in June. So this is another way of getting teaching out that I never thought, and that is going to Austin and testifying. Testifying before. So, I was used to, you go to a conference or you go to a listserv and you learn things there, or the NEH seminars, but promoting pedagogy by, going to, going to Austin and testifying, that wasn't.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do it again, unless, now if it gets on the agenda, that's the good news, then we won't have to testify again. So this is, at my age, to have a whole new concept of how you promote teaching has been a surprise to me.
Yeah, that's true. Like even what we're doing now
Yeah.
is help promoting teaching.
We have gotten some support, by the way, from some of the state board members.
Okay.
You know, we definitely have. So and we're hoping to keep that up.
Excellent. Those are all great. Well, thanks for that.
Yeah.
So we want to know, who do you network with? And it sounds like you're networking down in Austin, but who do you network with for teaching, and where do you go to get your teaching ideas?
Listservs actually help me, because there's a big listserv on for Native Studies, and there's a big one on Utopian Studies.
Okay.
Conferences is another one, but it's been frustrating because both with Native Studies and the MLA, Modern Language Association, and Utopian Studies, I've gone to several panels on teaching. I think, oh, that's really cool. Oh, I don't teach anymore. But the way I have been able to use this is there's a lifelong learning program at UT Austin, and I contribute to that every once in a while. So the conferences have, but this experience of working with this committee, and the nice thing about this committee is it's mostly Native American, but it's a real mix of backgrounds, not just different tribes, but professions. And some of the people are professionals who have taught high school and then are now professors and publishing. And one of them has a lot of knowledge about teaching science, and we want to do that in this Native Studies course. So again, that's been a new source. You know, up to this time, it's been conferences and, you know, reading some articles. But now it's this working on this course that's taught me. So it is nice. You don't want to say the end of your career, but certainly here I am retired, still getting new sources of networking information, which is nice.
That's
and it'll be really great if the course gets accepted.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, fingers crossed for
Yeah.
you. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah, as we wrap this up today, just looking back at the beginning of your career, what would you say to your younger self?
At the beginning, first of all, I had to make a transition. My PhD is not in English. My PhD is in American Studies, interdisciplinary. So at the beginning, I was really focused, and I think this is good, on preparing the students for that discipline. In other words, you're an English teacher, so you got to prepare them to write and help them to write. And I want them to know what I thought was what good literature, is, and why, and how it might help the whole process of transferring that type of knowledge and values that I talked about. But it was pretty much narrowly focused on preparing them to be English teachers or editors or anything that involved writing. What I discovered later on, and I don't blame myself for that. I think that was really good. I'm glad I did that, and I tried to keep doing that. But now I wrote a little article for this little orange book that the UT Academy
the little orange
has
book.
that called "I'm Looking Through You," and I love the Beatles, and unfortunately that's a sad song, but see, I said song. That's still New York, Long Island. That's where I was raised. What I would have told myself is, if you can, and you can't do it all the time, you look at a student and you think, yes, you're preparing her to be a good English teacher, to a good writer for a corporation, many things that English majors can do. But you're also, not just that career, but 5 years out, 10 years out, how will this course help them to feel that what they're doing in their own life is meaningful? How will it help them to entertain themselves without social media, or movies or anything else, but just by paying attention, looking at things, and savoring them. Because, if you're totally dependent on other types of people or media or to entertain you all the time, then you're becoming maybe an interesting sponge. But so I look through them. Yes, career to get through this course, maybe career preparation, but then later on in this type of the different types of meaningfulness of your life. So that's, I would have gone back and said to myself, yes, in this freshman composition class, because all of us had to teach freshman composition when we came in as new professors, teach them how to write, how to argue, but that also, and then what type of careers, and then how will this writing help you to be more perceptive and bring you joy later on? Even if you switch over to writing songs, or even if you're not even writing anything, it's just your thought process.
Right.
Will that enrich that? Because, so that's looking through you beyond.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Roemer. Any final thoughts?
No, other than the fact that I think one of the strongest things about UT Arlington is some of its fine teachers, and this is not more than a footnote to the question you just asked. Where do I go? Where do I go to some people like this? The reason I say that is she is one of our Rota nominees this year, and because I've won a lot of teaching awards, I'm on a lot of selection committees. So I get to read all the Rota packets, and then when some of the Rota people apply for the UT System Academy Distinguished Teachers.
Oh, yeah.
When I was on that committee, I got to read all those. So it's really uplifting, when I do this thing with Rhoda, I say, wow, things like that are going on at UTA.
It's inspiring.
She's taking a group of teachers to Japan, next week or next week?
Next month.
Next month.
That's exciting.
And so, it's UTA has been a good place for me.
Oh, good. Well, thanks so much. We
Okay.
appreciate you.
And thank you for starting this.
Yeah,
Sure.
you're the inaugural
Okay.
interviewee. So thanks everyone for listening. The Pedagogy NEXT podcast series showcases and celebrates teaching stories and insights from both award-winning faculty members and university administrators who directly or indirectly support teaching. Hosted by the UT Arlington Academy of Distinguished Teachers, in partnership with OIT and the Center for Distance Education, we feature a storytelling focus on highlighting diverse voices of educators and others who can support learning excellence in higher education and UT Arlington. The aim is to share experiences, ideas, innovations, and inspirations to develop reflective teaching and excellence. The podcast has a companion blog, so stay tuned. For any questions or comments, contact Dr. Peggy Simingson at peggys.uta.edu. Stay tuned for our next podcast where we talk to Dr. Pete Smith of the Academy of Distinguished Teachers and Professor of Modern Languages, as well as Chief Analytics and Data Officer. After that episode, for the third episode, you'll be hearing from myself, Dr. Peggy Simingson, on ideas related to teaching and higher education. Podcast hosts include Dr. Pete Smith, LaDonna Aiken, and myself, Dr. Peggy Simingson. Behind-the-scenes support comes from our thought partners and experts in OIT, including Lee Pierce, Howard Prince, and Cyrus Haskell. Dakota Jimenez in the Center for Distance Education is helping produce, and then again our disclaimer, all views shared are the perspectives of individual faculty and do not reflect the views of UT Arlington or the Academy of Distinguished Teachers. We'll see you next time.